Melbourne. This metropolis in southeast Australia is ranked time and again as the world's most livable city. Among its 4.4 million inhabitants, there are many young creatives who are shaping the way of life in the city. Far removed from international attention, Melbourne has found its own style. Relaxed, cosmopolitan, and aiming for the future.
Melbourne is, for me, is the best city if you want to live in a city. Life is generally a lot better here than other places. When I was working as a bicycle courier, I'd be riding through all the different laneways of the city, and you start seeing all these different posters and big murals. And so I was always like in the veins of the city, like in the underground.
To use public spaces as his studio. That was Mike Macatron's dream. After studying art in New York and experimenting a lot with graffiti, he returned to Melbourne as a street artist. By now, he knows the impact he's able to make with his art.
You don't want to get too worried about being near. And doing the eyes, that's the one thing that humans always just focus in on the eyes, and that's where the emotion is. So I'm doing that in can, so it's in some kind of detail. But then the main thing is the basic shape. And if there is the vague shadow line and the background colour and the foreground colour, then it will make sense from far. And I enjoy things when they're messy, so it's something that I even try to paint like a kid would paint.
With his artwork, Mike comments on life in a city whose image he, too, is constantly changing.
And then this place here used to be a cat hotel where people drop off their cats when they go holidays. And so it used to be all cats all around, but I noticed that they moved out. So I thought we could take out the whole wides in between use. So I don't know how long it will be empty like this. Maybe there'll be a building in a month. Maybe it'll be 2 years. So we don't really have permission for today, but we're just doing it quick.
Over the last 10 years, Melbourne has become a centre of street art. For most of the locals, the wall paintings are an expression of a city fascinated with culture and an attraction that even draws the tourists. For this reason, the city is so generous when it comes to issuing permits and even offering painting spaces for use. The strong southerly winds coming in from the ocean often cause abrupt weather changes in Melbourne, with strong breezes racing through the streets in the city centre.
The wind can be a real problem if you're halfway down a building and realise that it's too windy to continue. If it's a tall building, quite easily the wind can take you away. So get down to the ground or to a balcony or get off your ropes as soon as you can. And
her place of work is normally sky high. Nikki Gregoire is an industrial climber.
And there's plenty of blokes that are still surprised when they see a girl doing what's considered a man's job. So, yeah, they still get the reaction like, are you going to do that too? And it's like, yeah, I'm not there to make the coffee.
Nikki's job is highly versatile. She carries out maintenance on skyscrapers, repairs the facades, installs aerials, and services the air conditioning, and does so in any place a permanent platform or scaffold is not fitted. At the office tower she's been called out to today, she's cleaning the windows.
The higher you are, the less of a sense of height that you have for some reason. Everything's so distant, so you lose that fear factor being up high. Well, I'm sure there's days that I have, felt a bit awkward and whatever, but it's more a worry of what might drop from what you're doing. You're always more worried about people below.
Nikki and her colleagues have to ensure that all their tools are fastened to them and don't become deadly weapons, which makes even the smallest job a challenge when you're hanging from a rope.
So it's just a finger sucker. Just gives me something to hold on to so that I can stay where I want to stay. Otherwise I'll end up just floating away. And the higher you are, the closer you'll get pulled into the building naturally, but as you get down lower, you just move off all the time. So just have a sucker to push you in. Keeps easier.
Multi-skilled climbing workers like Nikki are in high demand in a city like Melbourne, whose centre has been growing upwards for years now.
I think I've got to see a lot of Melbourne that I wouldn't have seen if I didn't do this job, that's for sure. And I think it's pretty privileged that way. The mornings are definitely the best part of the day. Watching the sunrises and watching the hot air balloons, we get the best view of all that kind of thing. It was an awesome way to start the day.
If the sun is shining or not, Adam Elliott is rarely aware of it. He needs complete calm in his studio and endless amounts of time. For each second of film, Adam has to shoot 25 single frames, changing his character's position minimally between each shot. They accept this patiently. They're made of clay.
This is Ernie Biscuit, and he is the lead character in my new film. And he's a deaf Parisian taxidermist who falls in love with a blind Australian woman.
Adam won an Oscar for his film Harvey Crumpet, about a Polish immigrant with Tourette's syndrome.
The characters do have to change their expressions, so the technique I use is with magnets. So this character here, he might start off with a little smiley face, and he might suddenly be shocked, so he has to go to a ooh mouth, which is that one. So we would sort of have up to 12 different mouth shapes going through the whole process just for him to go, ooh.
Adam creates his creatures using industrial plasticine, which he can shape by heating it. He doesn't need any sketches, he already has the characters visualized in his head.
I never really get tired of playing with modelling clay. You know, it's like I'm a 5-year-old boy making something, and it's, there's something caveman-like when you have a big blob of modelling clay in your hand, and you feel like God, I suppose, because you're about to create a character, and the character can look however you want it to look.
Everything in Adam's film worlds comes from his own hands, even the props. And apart from the clay, he only uses 3 other materials: cardboard, wire and paint. Adam's clay figures are all quite eccentric. Some of them are kleptomaniacs, Others suffer from Asperger's syndrome.
My characters are all underdogs. They're all marginalised people. They're all the other. And I don't see them as disabled or afflicted. I see them as characters who have flaws, and I think we all have flaws, and I'm just celebrating those flaws.
In the editing room, Adam tries out short scenes and corrects details right away in his studio next door. This perfectionist needs about 5 years to complete one film.
I was giving a talk recently to some little children, and at the end of the talk I said, "Any questions?" And this little boy put up his hand and he said, "Mr. Elliott, you said it takes you 5 years to make a film." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I've worked out you've only got 4 left." And I said, "Oh." And I thought about it and I thought, he's right, I have only got, so I know that in my life I can only make a certain amount of films, and I may only make 9 films, but I've got to make sure each one is as good as the last.
Adam Elliott has rejected several offers from Hollywood. He wants to remain his own boss. And most of all, he doesn't want to leave his city.
Melbourne, I think, has never been too self-aware, and Melburnians, we're almost like country folk. We are a huge city, of course, and millions of us live here, but there's a friendliness to Melbourne that you don't sort of get in other Australian cities.
His part of town is Thornbury, where many Greek and Italian immigrants lived who came to Melbourne just after World War II. Today, it's the colourful mixture of young and old, families and artists, and workers and students that makes Thornbury so interesting. And it's in this human cosmos that Adam finds his stories.
Can't believe how lucky she is. She's the local identity. She takes that trolley with her everywhere. I see her nearly every morning. She's almost like she's never gone home. I find her fascinating. I know where she lives too now because I followed her one day. I discreetly followed her to where she lives, and she lives in a beautiful big old house, very run down and ramshackle. She's one of the local interesting people that I'm sure will end up in one of my films eventually. Yeah. Is she gone now? No? All right. Come on. Rod. Come on. Come on.
The colourful and the quirky. You'll find them on every corner of Melbourne. But to really stand out here, you have to be truly different.
It's interesting the reactions and stuff you get. Like sometimes you do get people who just don't really appreciate it. But I think the positive energy you get making a whole bunch of people smile, or some little kid just being like, "Mom, it's a fairy!" Those moments are pretty awesome.
Nixie Killick is not yet 25, but has already completed her fashion design studies and started up her own label. With her highly imaginative streetwear, which she calls Wearable art, she's made a name for herself worldwide.
So this is the piece that Lady Gaga wore for her tour campaign. And it's a 3D printed powder composite that I created through body scan, 3D body scan of a neck, and then you print layer by layer with pigment in each piece. So you can see it's pretty delicate. So this is a bra that is made from foam, and this metallic fabric my friend brought back from Thailand as a special little treasure piece, and I only have this much. So all I can make is this, and I can never repeat it. Super special, just enough to fit around the corners. So these are laser cut earrings. You can see the plexiglass piece comes out. And then attach hair to them. And this hair is human hair, so that you can cut it and dye it and straighten it and crimp it, so you can give your earring a haircut.
Nixie is in constant contact with other creatives in Melbourne, exchanging ideas with them. They're not just designers, but artists, experimenting with new methods and materials.
Being kind of a nerd, it makes it easier. So many incredible machines that you can do anything with, but they're used for one thing, but I can use them for something else, which is really exciting. So I think that's where most of these things, like forming plastics like this as well, to create shapes in anything that you want. But the machine is for making car headlights, and I can make sculptural, amazing shapes. But the machinery, I think, is already there. It's just about kind of hijacking it for what you want to do, which is really exciting.
Nixie, who calls herself a techno-optimist, still puts her initial ideas for shapes and colours down on paper.
I grew up in the bush, miles away from anywhere, and it's this incredible fantasy place. It's incredible out there, and I think that's where a lot of the natural references and stuff come from as well, just this really deep bush, this sense of nature just being everywhere. In my work, there's a way of trying to create a hypercolour, sort of kind of how I would like to see the world, maybe. Like the colour is already there, but maybe you can just turn up the volume and try and figure out how to illustrate those colours in a really colourful, crazy way.
Nixie Killick works hard to make it as a young businesswoman in the rough and tumble of the fashion world, and still remain true to herself. For instance, when she headed to India and Nepal at her own initiative to source companies which would sew her clothes under conditions in line with her ethical standards. For Nixie, success is not just measured in money.
And I think in Melbourne there's a really huge push for innovative design and interesting twists on technology and fashion and different disciplines and stuff. So I think here it's really amazing, and the feedback and support I've had in Melbourne has been incredible.
If New York is the city that never sleeps, then Melbourne is the city where the people like their sleep the most, at least according to a worldwide study. Nevertheless, you'll find the lights burning in one city centre eatery at 5 in the morning. Its owner, Joost Bakker, likes to get up that bit earlier than all the rest, especially when there's something on his mind, which right now is the waste.
We just have to clean the alley.
Yeah.
Like we're not.
It's not your job to clean it.
Yes.
This poor guy comes here every Monday morning and tries to clean up, and then if he doesn't clean it up properly, then everybody complains that they haven't done a good job. But how are you supposed to clean this up, It's so frustrating. And it just, every week it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse,
The weekly delivery of milk to Joost's restaurant. He orders it in churns.
Yeah, so this basically saves us about 80,000 bottles a year. So plastic bottles that don't need to be purchased by the farmer, but they also don't need to be thrown away by us. So we just have these and, they just wash them out and reuse them over and over again.
Joost moved to Melbourne at the age of 9 as an immigrant child. He inherited his enterprising spirit and love of the environment from his parents, tulip growers from Holland.
I mean, I've always been obsessed with waste and why we create it in the first place. And then when I became a florist 20 years ago, I started doing flowers in restaurants, and I realised how much rubbish restaurants produce. And often you enter through the back door and you just see the mountains of rubbish that busy restaurants produce. And I thought, no, I want to do a business that is completely zero waste, like no bin at all.
Joost has banned all packaging from his restaurant and replaced it with reusable containers. But his waste avoidance strategy goes much further. He even gets some of the basic ingredients for his dishes for free from top-class restaurants. Joost uses the bones they've left over to make a tasty broth.
It's just society today. We haven't cherished. I mean, we've got replacements for this now. We've got man-made alternatives for broth, which is such a shame because, you know, this is one of the most beautiful foods you can possibly eat.
The bones have to be boiled down for 24 to 48 hours to make his nutrient-rich soups, which he cooks on purpose right in the middle of his restaurant, so that the guests can realise how hygienically he works with the foodstuffs, which really is quite a rarity.
In Holland, people go, well, why are you doing it this way? You know, they're very, a lot of countries are very hard to change their ways. And I think Melbourne is the fastest at taking on new technology and new ideas, and, you know, they're very quick to change.
Joost's latest acquisition is his own composting unit. It was made in South Korea. The unit gobbles up all of the kitchen waste and leaves Joost with a waste-free restaurant.
So the composter is filled with a microbe that's found in lava, was discovered under a seabed. It's a very unusual microbe because it tolerates really high salt and really high temperatures. So normally it's one or the other. And what this microbe does is it breaks it down from organic waste very fast. So in 24 hours, it breaks down organic waste from 100 litres to 10 litres.
Joost processes 50 tonnes of waste each year in his own backyard, without a single nasty smell. And his soup kitchen is a benefit to the whole community. The fertiliser from the composter is used on a 3-hectare piece of land at the edge of the city. Joost grows more than 200 plants and vegetables here for his business. He designed his home and workplace himself. Its patented facade consists of more than 30,000 strawberry plants. Joost only used recycled material to build his house, not least because he wanted to demonstrate that his vision of sustainability really does work in practice.
An architect should know, if he chooses a material, what impact that has when the building gets pulled down. Or a doctor should understand nutrition. Or, you know, like we're all so specialised that we don't know enough about what impact our choices are making on the rest of the world. So if we think about everything that we produce being endlessly recyclable, then most of our problems are solved.
Joost Bakker has countless talents, but his greatest one is to keep looking at a problem until a solution occurs to him.
I normally just say artist, so I create stuff that's the easiest way to describe what I do. But I'm a florist, I design buildings, whatever, I don't really know. I don't do anything properly.
The standard of living in Melbourne is high. A gold rush here in the 1850s drew hundreds of thousands from across the planet to this city, transforming Melbourne into a trading and business centre overnight and bringing wealth and prosperity in its wake. As the population grew, so too did the demand for food. This was a boom for the fishermen especially, as the people of Melbourne love their snake mackerel, which they call barracuda. Whoever made it back to the harbour first got the best prices, which prompted the resourceful fishermen to build the so-called cooter boats, ships that had the biggest possible storage areas and were still fast. From 1950 onwards, these elegant wooden boats were replaced by motor ships, with just a few of them surviving to the present day, until Tim Phillips turned his attention to the cooter boats.
I just love touching them, you know, just love being around them really. It's just so special. Most of these boat builders didn't have plans as we know today. They were built by rule of thumb, and a fisherman would come in and he'd say, look, I want one, you know, just a little bit longer or a little bit more beam than the last one you built. And so they were an evolved design 1 year to the next year over a period of about 100 years.
Tim amassed everything he could get his hands on about the boats and how they were built, and then began to reconstruct them. A major demand has grown for them by now as regatta boats, with more than 100 of them already rebuilt by him and his team. Thanks to Tim and his boat builders, the wooden boats are now at anchor once more in Port Phillip Bay.
This is Portsea in 1901, and that's the fishing cottage I used to stay in right next to the water, collecting wood on the beach. And this is the fishing camp at Fisherman's Beach, and in the background there you can see the little net dinghies, and they used to go out and shoot the nets around here and catch the Australian salmon. I saw all this happening when I was young, and that's why we've all got the passion for the wooden boats and the fishing in particular. She's a very much loved member of our family. I've owned her for 35 years nearly, I think. They love to be in the water. They're Carvel built boats, and they rely on moisture in the planking, keeping the planks tight between the seams. So it's critical that she goes in the water very urgently.
Tim is also incredibly proud of the Storm Bay. 17 metres long, it was built in 1925. He found it when it was a wreck and spent years restoring it in detail.
It's very gentle now, it's not much breeze, but the breeze will come up and she'll be...
The former fishing cutter is an ideal ship for day trips around Port Phillip Bay.
We're doing 9 knots coming up here, which is pretty good. Got a little bit of tide under us, but she's a quick boat, sails well for 100 years old.
Tim is living out his passion and is giving back the city a piece of its history.
The sea's a very calming influence really, and you come out here and you tend to leave your worries at home and you think about smaller things rather than the wider issues. You just cocoon yourself into what's happening in the micro environment.
Architecture in Melbourne. What makes the metropolis so appealing are the densely packed Victorian buildings from the colonial era, together with postmodern futurist structures. The cityscape lives from its contrasts, with its urban spaces full of life and diversity. The dancers in the Chunky Move company are exploring ways in their performance to interact with the city. Using headphones, the artistic director, Anouk van Dijk, gives them rehearsal instructions. The dancer, Tara Samaya, is still quite new to the group.
You're kind of like very theatrical backlight. You see what I mean? Yeah. Because we have a big connected triangle of threesome force.
Their conceptual work is completely immersed in their surroundings, yet it challenges and elates Tara's performing as a dancer.
Try to react a little sharper on each other.
We played with the structure of the building outside and with the weather and the space and the nature of the floor, the gravel. And it just sublime because she connected us so much as dancers that we kind of energetically could work in any space. And so in that, she wants to send us outside into the elements.
Almost every day, Tara Somaya comes to the Australian Centre for Contemporary Art, which has been transformed into a temple of modern dance by the Chunky Move company.
I was quite an energetic kid, like when I wasn't at ballet, because I predominantly did ballet for the first 10, 15 years of my life. I was, climbing trees and like doing every sports.
Tara is one of 20 members of the company with whom the Dutch woman Anouk van Dijk is currently developing her work. Chunky Move is an artistic collective that wants to use its pieces to comment on social developments. In the process, the dancers are constantly exploring new means of expression, experimenting with movement and body language. Tara's training as a ballerina is only useful to a limited extent, as the demands of contemporary dance are even greater.
As I get older in the profession, I have to unlearn the things that I thought I knew because my body's constantly changing and, we're not machines or robots and there's like every injury under the sun.
The current piece is all about being an alien, about the individual and society, about immigration and arrival. Tara, who is of Malaysian origin, is attempting to use movement to interpret her experiences.
It's a beautiful feeling to be able to know that you can influence so many people through art. Like, it's such an old method of sharing stories and cultures. So I feel very grateful every time I step on stage and I feel like this heightened sense of adrenaline pumping. Like, I think the day that I don't feel the adrenaline, like my body absorbed by it, that I know that I'm not nervous enough to be on stage anymore.
Over the coming months, Tara will perform the piece up to 5 times a week. At Chunky Move, despite all the effort, she's also learning how to stay in good physical and mental shape.
I think that it is a very dreamy experience because we spend so much time working on being in our bodies, and I feel so grateful to have a job that physically allows me to be in my body and understand my body, and also emotionally allows me to express through that.
The people of Melbourne love their coffee, and it would be hard to find another place in the world with such a varied culture devoted to all aspects of the coffee bean. Their passion began just after World War II, when Italian immigrants brought their espresso machines with them to their new homeland. Today, you'll find an excellent cappuccino on every corner. Nolan Herter has been spoiling his customers for quite a while now with exquisite filter coffee.
Filter coffee will be terrible if you don't do it right. And that means people probably find it easier to hide bad coffee in milk and sugar. So a cappuccino is much easier to make it taste chocolatey and sweet. Whereas filter coffee, you really have to have good coffee to start with, good green. It has to be roasted to a nice level, and it has to be brewed correctly. It'll show up in the cup. And to me, that's what's so magic about coffee. To have a good coffee, there's so many things that can go wrong. So you know when you're drinking a good coffee, you're really lucky. It's a really special thing, you know.
The whole process is ingenious. The barista weighs out the exact amount of coffee and grinds it. When it's made in a siphon, the coffee brewer uses a vacuum. The vacuum is created in the glass that then draws the boiling water with the coffee through the filter, completely smoothly and evenly. And this is the best way to retain the flavour and taste.
My first job, I got to wash dishes. I washed dishes faster than anyone else. They called me Turbo. And then from there, I got to make coffee in this place. And it was a really place that took coffee seriously. I got to make coffee for myself. One day, finally, I got to make coffee for a customer. And I watched the coffee go out to the table, and I could see the customer like drinking the coffee, and the eyes roll back. And that feeling was like really nice, that I just made something and made them feel good, and they appreciate it and made their day better.
Nolan goes to visit the coffee farmers in Central America from whom he buys his beans on a regular basis. This gives him an opportunity to check on the quality of the coffee types and the working conditions of the pickers. Fair trade is personal for him.
Melbourne's an amazing city. I love it. For me, what's great about it is I'm constantly challenged by the city. So no matter how crazy we get with our ideas for a coffee program or whatever we want to do, Melbourne's ready to embrace it.
Right now, Nolan is supplying 14 other cafes in Melbourne with different types of coffee that he produces in his own roastery.
There's a lot of science to roasting coffee, but I think it's really important to have some kind of connection with the coffee also. So your gut, your instinct. With coffee, if you have that conversation with the coffee, I think it's really important. So the whole time I'm going to listen carefully and smell carefully and just try to understand what's happening for the coffee, you know.
Roasting coffee is all about having the exact synthesis between the temperature and the time. And if Nolan misses the right moment, the beans turn dark and taste bitter. So the timing has to be adjusted for each type of coffee. The range of tastes with coffee is enormous, and it has more than 800 aromas, even more than wine.
Coffee should have character of different things, like a good wine does. A really nice heavy body is great. In the geishas here, I'm not really expecting to get a huge heavy body, but I might get a very creamy or vanilla, silky, much more elegant. Sometimes it's like a mouthful of pillows or silk or something, you know, that's amazing.
Nolan and his staff are still learning something new every day, and they pass on their knowledge to the coffee-mad people of Melbourne at their seminars each week.
For me, getting to know the farmer and the farm and roasting their coffee, there's a really amazing connection there. And then when I finally get to drink that cup of coffee and thinking back where it came from, it's a really beautiful thing.
You don't have to go far beyond Melbourne to get an impression of what the country looked like when Australian Aborigines settled here 30,000 years ago. Mark Olive likes to pursue his forefathers' traditions. And what interests him most are their eating habits. Mark is one of Australia's best-known chefs.
This is paper bark. When you use it, it's almost like alfoil, because when you wet this and you put whatever meat, maybe kangaroo fillet or even a little bit of fish, it releases this lovely smell and it almost infuses the fish with it.
This fertile area, where Mark is right now, was created by a volcanic eruption.
This was a great food bowl, basically, and a great food source for a lot of these, Indigenous people from this area. So there's lots of kangaroos and lots of emus. So that's where they got a lot of their protein from.
Which animals the Aborigines hunted down, or which plants and fruits they used for different purposes, all of this knowledge is barely known in today's Australia. Mark has been amassing this knowledge for more than 20 years and developing his own recipes from it.
This is called a kangaroo apple. Now these fruits make great relish, chutneys, anything like that. Really nice to put on pizzas as well, really, really nice. But in the day, for Aboriginal women, it was known as a contraceptive. It's a sea celery. It's like celery and parsley together. The celery, it's really pungent in flavour. It's very... nice.
Mark's route back to Melbourne takes him along the Great Ocean Road. Mark Olive is a frequent guest on Australian cooking shows. Sometimes he even hosts them himself. With his crossover cuisine, he aims to break down the qualms Australians have about eating their beloved national symbol, one that has become a plague in many parts of the country.
I'd love for people to eat a lot more kangaroo. Very, very tasty, very nice, very lean, and very, very good for you. So, a great meal.
Mark rubs mountain pepper and lemon myrtle into the emu ham and lets it smoke and cure overnight. Together with the sea parsley, some Wearable spinach, and the kangaroo fillet, Mark creates a dish that's unconventional and traditional at the same time, entirely in line with his philosophy.
It's been an interesting journey for me to mix these flavours together and utilise foods from the bush and adapt it into something contemporary.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
That's gorgeous. Thanks.
The calm in the old abandoned harbour of Melbourne is perfect for Brian Tanti to take an extremely rare vehicle out on a test run.
The 300 SL is like a landmark car for its time. When it was built in 1956, it was the statement of what is the best, fastest, well-designed car in the world. That's what a 300 SL is.
For Brian Tanti, a dream came true several years ago when one of the richest men in Australia entrusted him with his private collection of 130 vintage cars. Now Brian is in charge of the care and restoration of these automotive treasures. His plan today is to put a new wing on the Porsche 550 Spider.
You're beating shape into it to stretch the metal, right, to stretch the three-dimensional form. And in other areas, you can see here where the metal is starting to shrink. It's starting to gather. So as you push it that way, that's coming around. I've had this hammer for 33 years, and it's part of me. I wouldn't be without it. I couldn't do my job without it. So to me, this is, if I lost this, I'd be quite upset.
Even James Dean once drove a Porsche Spider and was fatally injured in it in an accident. They're worth about $5 million each today. When he's reconstructing the wing, Brian only uses tools that were already available at the time the Porsche was manufactured. He learned about car body construction work as a young man in England, and today he's one of the most sought-after restorers in the world. Over the last few years, Brian has committed every free minute he has to a research project in which young people and students are involved in working on the development of the racing car of the future. The Racer is a test platform for the latest technologies.
Has that combination of both in the design. I think that kids engaging this kind of activity can teach them a lot more, can give them a moral code to follow almost, and I think when they don't engage in that kind of activity, there's a diminished sense of responsibility for what they're doing in the world, you know, because they're not connected to it, so they don't feel like they have to fix it. They throw it away and get a new one.
The chassis of the FR1 consists of ultra-light carbon fibre, and Brian's able to get his prototype up to a speed of 200 kilometres per hour in less than 5 seconds.
It's like the closest thing you can get to a four-wheel motorbike. The feeling of power and your ability to lose this thing is unbelievable. A car that gives me a lot of pleasure to drive. It's just beautiful.
With its lightweight design, it needs 20% less fuel than a conventional model, and Brian's aim is to have it completely emission-free.
The challenge is to make it renewable and to make it out of recycled materials as well. And I think there is technology around to do that now. It'll be much more sustainable.
The street artist, Mike Macatron, is looking for the right place for his latest work. The designs for his open-air artworks are created in his studio. And normally, his pieces consist of a combination of different motifs. He needs these rough drawings for when he transfers them onto the walls later on.
I mean, everybody starts being an artist at the same time when they're 2, 3, 4 in kindergarten. And in my house there was 6 kids and everyone's kind of crazy, and there's an old part of the house and we just start drawing all over the walls when we were, you know, under 10. And I started getting into street art and graffiti when I was a teenager, just partly vandalism, partly just for fun. The appeal of that type of art, it's the extreme side, to climb buildings and put your art up somewhere, or to go in tunnels or abandoned places.
As one of the best-known artists on the scene, Mike now gets commissioned directly by house owners, more and more often.
A lot of people have inbuilt hatred for graffiti, where it's the colourful letters that they can't understand. But a lot of things that I do are, you know, natural world, or there's animals in there, so it doesn't have the same reaction, I guess. They appreciate the cultural aspect, and it does help the neighbourhood as well.
There are often restaurant owners who would like to use his street art to make their places more eye-catching. Mike decides on an individual basis whether their aims are in line with his artistic positions. Today, he's working for free.
So this bar down here, they're a long-standing bar from Melbourne, but they're having problems with the new apartments that just turned up. It's like 6 months old, so they've got all these noise restrictions, and it's a common thing where residents move in and then they complain about noise. So I guess this is some kind of relevance to this. We're in the battle. When you're doing public art, it seems to be that everybody has an opinion and they like to tell you. And sometimes it gets annoying, so I just listen to music and just kind of pretend like I'm really busy.
As expressive as Mike's artistic statements are, his art is transient. As soon as tomorrow, it might be painted over.
Definitely, like every time you paint in the street, it becomes part of the city. And the city is like a living thing, like it breathes and it has its ups and downs and changes. So the art is just a reflection of that. And I think it's like a reflection of a healthy city when there is public art.